what was it like having like names like Alpo Martinez and Wayne Perry and Rayful Edmond, like they were running
Well,
wild in here. What was it like?
I have personal, up and close, up close and personal situations with like Alpo. Um, I'm gonna go back to that, but Wayne, Ray, they were older. They were older than us. They were like 10 years older than us. You know what I mean? So we were little kids, and we would hear about them. And of course, and we was, we'd see Rayful in the, sometimes in the club and stuff like that when we were young, just starting out going to the club. They were already in there balling and stuff like that. And, we would just hear about it and we like, man, God damn, man, yeah, they get money, blah, blah, blah. That's how we used to talk. But, we just never had run-ins as far as, we would know somebody. It was like 3 degrees of separation. So you would know somebody that's working for Rayful that you were close to, and that's what I was talking about the access earlier. I could easily get something that was coming from Rayful if I wanted to. You know what I mean? But back to Alpo, we didn't get down with. We had some homies, even around First and Kennedy, that were from New York. Good dudes, you know what I mean? And they were our friends, still these friends to today, the ones that are living. And Alpo, I had a good friend of mine named Garrett. There, when I went to Carroll, Archbishop Carroll, I went there in '88. My mother made me, because I got put out of Theodore Roosevelt for fighting. And then my mother made me repeat the 10th grade and as a punishment, she sent me to Archbishop Carroll. It was all boys in there. You know what I'm saying? I had already knew Garrett, but we got close when I went to Carroll because he went to Carroll as well. And then, earlier on, he was attracted to a girl I went to junior high school with, named Capri. So he would ask me about her, and I was like, man, nobody thinking about her. We wasn't thinking about her in the neighborhood. She was a neighborhood girl to us, but he was like, man, the most beautiful woman he had ever seen, right? So I was like, man, I introduced you to her, So I introduced Garrett to Caprice, and they hit it off. And me and Garrett would hang out, you know what I mean? He'd be like telling me stuff like, man, look, keep them uptown dudes all around, because he was from around Northeast. He was like, man, keep them uptown girls away from uptown dudes away from my girl. And I was like, Garrett, we wasn't thinking about her, So you ain't got to worry about that. I got you though, bro. So, long story short, Alpo started coming around because me and Garrett would be out somewhere at a go-go or something like that. And this dude, Alpo, he wasn't like the New York dudes that I was friends with. He was kind of loud. We call them type dudes a Bama. You know what I'm saying? Not just because he was from New York. He could have been anywhere. He's just a Bama to me. You know what I mean? I wasn't. And I used to tell Garrett, man, I had a funny feeling about this dude, so I don't want to be out with him and stuff like that because I feel like he just was. He needed attention, you know what I mean? Then he was always talking about somebody's girl and stuff like that, man. I'm like, we don't, that's disrespectful to us. One thing we did, we ain't mess with each other's girls and stuff like that. He ain't had no respect. And I said, Garrett, man, look, I'm not gonna hang around with you and him. And I used to tell him, man, you don't need him, bro. Alpo had that gift of gab, you know what I'm saying? And Garrett felt like he made Garrett feel like he needed him, and trust me, Garrett didn't need him at the time. You know what I mean? This dude was a millionaire in Archbishop while he was at school, a millionaire. You know what I mean? So I was like, I just couldn't understand the relationship, and me and Garrett had kind of, we was going in different directions and stuff like that, and the next thing I knew, it ended ugly, you know what I mean? Somehow, Alpo, I don't know. I still don't know to this day. I didn't ask questions. I didn't dig into it. I was hurt. But, we started getting used to losing people, and Garrett was one of those people I lost, and I I was like, man, see, you know, all I could say to myself is I told him, you know what I mean, this dude wasn't right. You know what I mean? So that's my take on Alpo. I still, you know, I don't wish bad on, especially the dead and stuff like that, but you know, eventually that dude was gonna get what he deserved. You know what I mean? A lot of dudes, and that's the thing about, you hear stories about certain dudes that, you know, you hear all the time, and people have different takes on it. But there were a lot of dudes in the city at the time that wasn't gonna play with Alpo. You know what I mean? So he knew what he had to do. You know, he had to team up with somebody, or he wasn't gonna last. He was gonna go leave in a body bag like a lot of out of towners were doing at the time. Yeah.
So when he ended up like linking with Wayne Perry, do you feel like that kind of like gave him the protection he
Oh,
needed
it
here?
absolutely 1,000%. Still, it hurts me. You know, of course, like I mentioned, hindsight. Still, it really hurts now because, you know, that at the time that started something that just trickled down to so much ugliness, and it kind of ended the era for that time in the city. I always say that the Wayne and Alpo situation is just unfortunately put the icing on the cake as far as the downfall for the city overall, well, as far as the underground parts. You know what I mean? So, yeah, it still hurts. You know what I mean? And we know our homies were so strong, especially Wayne. You know, Wayne, man. Wayne was a funny dude. My dealers being around Wayne, he always joning. You know, and we were silly. We were simple dudes, man. You know what I mean? The same dude that'll, you know, get you up out of there or do something violent to you is a funny, cold-blooded gentleman at the same time. You know what I mean? We were all smart. We were all, you know, educated and things like that, but we just got caught up in those times. You know what I mean? So some of us made the wrong decisions. Like I made the wrong decision. I consider myself a late bloomer when it came, because I fought all the time, but I wasn't a violent dude. And then I started, and like, you know, when those 90s hit, it was like I just started wilding, you know, hanging out with my cousins over Southeast, just doing wild shit, man. You know what I mean? And it didn't last long for me. You know, I paid for it. You know what I mean? So yeah, that was.
How so you talked earlier about, you know, getting shot. Did you feel like that kind of like
Oh,
that was a wake up call for you?
yes, sir. Because I was paralyzed from the neck down, and I was in the hospital for a year. So you know, when I first got shot, I had to send me to DC General. And what a lot of people don't know about DC General, well, back then, because DC General was closed now. Doctors, some of the best doctors from around the country would do residence. I think that's what you call them, residencies or whatever, at DC General. Luckily, when I got shot, it had, I think his name was Dr. Drew. Top surgeon, black surgeon, he was in there, and you know, gunshot wounds, victims, and stuff like that. He was, you know, he was renowned, and he was there when I came in there. So I still thank goodness for, you know, him being there at the time, because they weren't sure I was going to live. You know what I mean? And he was optimistic, did what he had to do. I was out of it. I was in a coma for a couple of days. And they did what they had to do, and I woke up, and then that's when I didn't even know I got shot. You know what I mean? It was just, I remember hearing gunshots, and I woke up in the hospital. So I remember he came in there and told me, you know, well, it's looking like you're probably never gonna walk again. You know what I mean? And so, you know, he told my family that, told me that, and I accepted it. I accepted it at first. And then, you know, I had to stay in there for a while. I was on the breathing machine, you know, and all I could do was blink my eyes, pretty much. And, you know, they explained to me what they were doing to me daily. And I kind of mentally accepted that, hey, I'm 21 years old, I'm not going to be able to walk again. And they said, you know, my time was up at ICU at DC General. They said, we're going to transfer you over to to NRH, Rehab Hospital by Washington Hospital Center. And I got over there, and I had a halo, what you call it. It's this, when you know your neck is broke, they screw this cage on you, on your head. It's like I had this big old halo on. So I got over there. I had attitude. I could talk. They took me off the breathing machine, so I could talk at the time. So the therapist over there would say, man, look, we're going to start taking you downstairs and try to, see if we can get some movement out of you. And I wouldn't do it. I would cuss them out. Like, man, I'm not going to be able to walk. What the fuck we going downstairs for? You know what I mean? And it took me a while. I had to have an out-of-body experience. It took me maybe 2 months to even agree to going downstairs. And I started seeing some movement, you know what I mean? And yeah, that inspired me. It inspired me to keep pushing. I connected more with my spirit inner spirituality, and my music. We loved music growing up in the city. We had, the great Melvin Lindsay. So we grew up listening to music, and it was healing for us. And I always say we had balance. The difference with us is we could be doing some wild shit out in the street all day, and then we come home and thought we was, super lovers. We'd be on the phone listening to music, so it was always healing to me. And I had my music in the hospital, and I believe that was a big part of inspiring me to, heal myself. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Do you feel like the crime now is worse than it was back then, or do you feel like it hasn't really changed?
Honestly, no, because it was more of us that were committing crimes, which, some people choose a crime to say that crime is worse, but no, we were committing all types of crimes. We might not have been carjacking somebody, but we were stealing cars. You understand what I'm saying? We'd wait till somebody was sleeping park and go get their car while they were asleep, stuff like that. So it's, it's an evolution when it comes to crime as well. So, these kids, whatever, inspires them, whether it's a video game or whether that's who they are, they see somebody else do something, they go do it. I don't think it's as many of them in numbers. The crimes they just seem egregious because the news will say, man, this is blah, 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 and then social media helps spread that information. But again, like you mentioned, we were the murder capital. We were the murder capital. So, nah, I just don't think it's worse. I don't think that the numbers are as high. I just think you get a couple of get a crash out, you get some crash out youngers every once in a while. But it's nowhere near. If the crime was like it was back in the day, these, other folks would be moving out of here. Trust me. Yeah.